Hi, and welcome to the Agile Couple. We're Kevin and Leeanne McManus, and we're closing out our final episode of our second series. And this is our sixth episode, which is kind of exciting. The series that we're on right now is called Modeling What Matters. And this episode is the 20% that changes everything, modeling focus for maximum impact. And really, we're talking about what's called the Pareto Principle or the 80-20 rule. You may have heard that and probably have had conversations around that. Kevin, how would you explain the Pareto Principle?
So basically what it means is 20% of your effort is going to produce 80% of the impact or 80% of the results.
Yeah. So like a couple examples that I wrote down, just top notes would be, you could look at different things. You could look at your top performers. You could look at customers. If you looked at time management, the same thing applies. So if you were to spend time on 20% of the tasks that ultimately generate 80% of the results you're looking for, that's what we're talking about. Right. So, or even in a personal world, if you focus on, those higher impact habits for yourself or skills that you have that you know are going to deliver for whatever you see as success, focus on those habits that you know are going to have the impact. Not all tasks should be treated equal is really what we're talking about. Yeah. Right.
There's a really cool quote by Mark Twain.
Yeah.
And it kind of highlights the importance of priority.
Yeah.
And he says, if the first thing you do every morning is eat a frog, you'll know that the worst part of your day is behind you.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think people have a tendency for those things that are the big rocks or the things that are challenging, they oftentimes will push those off. And I don't know, I always think that it's kind of a gross visual, but you get the,
turn green,
you
whatever.
get the idea,
yeah.
Right? Which is, take on those hard tasks first.
Well, I think prioritization is, again, another one of those concepts that's simple to understand, but very hard to put into practice, whether you're a leader or just in getting your daily stuff done, even in the personal world. And I think procrastination comes from a lot of different things. That's kind of what you're talking about.
Yep.
But we're talking about modeling behavior. So I believe in setting up guardrails. And that's kind of what we're trying to emphasize in this episode is, how do you recognize those things that actually have maximum impact? And where do we put the effort? And what are some of the things that might pop up that are, symptoms that we see that are leading to why you're not getting the outcome you're looking for? Right. So we've got this first kind of concept we want to talk about called the cost of always being on. And so examples of how maybe leaders unintentionally model distraction. We've got a few things in here, and you probably have more examples at home. But one example is checking phones in meetings constantly. Saying yes to every request, which I know Kevin and I have particular different experience with, as do most of you, I'm sure. Jumping in on every issue, those sort of things. So if you explore that and you really think about that, the message you're sending as somebody in a leadership role is everything is urgent, but nothing is really protected or nothing really matters. Everything's equalized. Right. So give us some of your examples there.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to the prioritization, in the absence of whoever is leading a particular project, or in the example of like a product owner that's managing a backlog, if there's no priority, you're basically absolving that responsibility and putting it on the team or whoever's going to produce. Mm-hmm. That's not their role, right? And I think from a prioritization standpoint, it's so critical, because you want to, once again, model that behavior of focus. And that means focusing on the highest priority items, the things that are going to give you the biggest value, that 80-20 rule. So where I've seen it is, when you have lack of clarity on prioritization, it just causes a lot of churn. Yeah. It also causes a lot of context switching, where people may be working on multiple projects and they're all considered to be number one, depending upon who's asking for it.
Yeah.
And it really puts them in a tough spot, because that context switching, it's been shown that, you've got, you may be only able to get 10% of something done on 4 or 5 projects per day. that becomes very defeating over time because you're not able to commit and focus on getting one knocked out, moving on to the next, which also means that your business value that you're working on is diluted and it's delayed.
Yeah.
So those are some of the examples that I've seen with regard to the lack of focus, lack of prioritization.
Well, this second comment that we just talked about, like the saying yes to every request, it's kind of coming ahead. I'm getting ahead a little bit, but I think it's an important thing that we've seen, that not just for Agile teams, but really anybody. So in an Agile team, if those of you that maybe aren't familiar with it, we're talking about Scrum specifically, you have a particular role called the Scrum Master or the Agile Lead, which they're really meant to kind of help block and manage impediments that are happening, and they kind of protect the team to keep them focused on some of their Scrum values, which is commitment and focus, right? So there's a particular role, and there's a reason why that role has that. If you're not working as an Agile team, but you still are trying to get the most impact out of what is happening on the team, what's being produced, somebody needs to take on that role. And often it's not. It's vacated and nobody has awareness of it. So what we've seen happen in any kind of team I can think about is you have a team who's working on all these things that we got to get done. And you have somebody, maybe another leader, who taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, Kevin, I really need to get this thing done. Would you be able to help my team, or would you be able to do this? People have a very hard time saying no, especially if it's another leader. That puts them in a compromising situation where they ultimately can't stay focused.
Right.
So somebody needs to have that role and build the guardrails to say, where the person then with confidence can say, I would love to, but that you have to go talk to so-and-so because that's who's keeping us focused on what we're working on.
Yeah.
And then they'll let us know how that's prioritized.
Right.
Otherwise, it's a weird cultural thing, and it feels like the individual is siloed and they have to respond on their own, and it causes all these other issues. So if you're ultimately the manager or the leader and you're in charge of the impact or the productivity, you're working against that, not having that guardrail set up.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of normal.
And I've had personal experience with that. And what I've advised people to do in those situations is just that. It's like if somebody comes and says, here's something that I'd like you to work on, even if you think it's 5 minutes,
right?
Because most time it's not going to be 5 minutes,
right?
Right. What I've asked them to do is just have them come and talk with me. Right. I'm the one that's responsible for making sure that the priorities, are maintained and that everybody is working in the right areas. And that totally resolves the situation from that person feeling that pressure when they know, okay, you've provided me an outlet.
Right.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people, they do feel obligated that if I'm asked to help, most people are people pleasers. They want to help. Yeah. They want to contribute.
Or it might even sound like fun, something cool they should go do.
Right.
But to me, it's also a symptom of something else. Why is a leader not going to the proper channel to do that? So that it's a lack of transparency. There's some reason, or it might be a compliment of you do a really great job,
right? But
still have respect for what's happening in that group so that everybody is aware of what's happening.
Right.
Well, you have to manage your time. You've got capacity planning. You got these different, things that have to be accounted for. So that's just one example, but we've seen that come up forever. Like that happens, right? So I just think as a leader, you kind of need to think about that. Maybe you're not modeling and setting up the guardrails for the most success on the team. And so you kind of need to protect the people on the team that way. So we want to talk about this other area called modeling deep work and boundaries. And so Kevin, first maybe set up some of the problems. I don't know if you have an example or I have an example if you don't, and then just define what deep work is.
Yeah, I think everybody can relate to the fact that, especially in a professional setting, we sometimes get overwhelmed with meetings, and those meetings are just energy suckers. And oftentimes you get out of a meeting and it's like, why did I even sit through that? I didn't have anything to do with it, right? But one of the practices that I put in place and before, because especially working in software development teams, you may be working on a problem. If somebody comes in and interrupts you, or you got a meeting or whatever, it could take you 30 minutes to spin back up to get your head back into, what you were doing.
Yeah.
And if you can minimize those disruptions, because oftentimes people need to have a large block of time to be able to just focus on work without those interruptions. So when we talk about, as far as the deep work is concerned, it's really being able to provide that ability for people to concentrate and really focus on getting the work done
Yeah.
without those interruptions. So a practice that I've recommended and put in place in the past is we try to front load, for example, any meetings that we're dealing with, try to get those done earlier in the morning, and then be able to have the rest of the day kind of blocked
focused.
out. Yeah, focused. And even having some days where I've asked, my team specifically, go into your calendar and mark this day out. Or I'll mark it out for the entire team that this block of 4 hours every Tuesday and Thursday, it's off limits, so that when people try to schedule meetings, it's blocked, right?
Well, Outlook actually has a feature now for focus time.
Yeah.
In the newer versions of Microsoft 365. We're not alone in this, right? There's a reason why they've
absolutely.
added that as a solution. Because it also helps the people that have a hard time saying no.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier. It's kind of like a bogey that you're throwing out there, but you're going to feel a lot better that you can focus and you can be productive.
Yeah.
People want to add value. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they don't want to go there and thrash all day, right? So another point of the blocking calendars, time is important, but even, I think you talked about this in a different episode, but even changing, we're going to talk about meetings a little bit, but changing not the hourly meeting thing is such a subtle thing, but makes a huge difference so that you can actually be productive. You can be prepared before you can go in. You've got time that if somebody pulls you after the meeting, that you're not late for your next one. There's a lot of benefits to just building guardrails like that for success so that you can be more impactful with your 20% focus, right? But the other comment on here that we've got is, and we kind of said it, people have a hard time saying no. So maybe if you have an understanding and the team has an understanding of what the actual priorities are, what are the tasks that we have to get done and why, because they're higher priority for business value or they're the most impactful to satisfy our customers or whatever the thing is, being able to say, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying not now.
Right.
But that not now, then you'll go through whatever our backlog looks like and you go through the proper channels. So we're not dissing you.
Right.
There's nothing like that, but there's a way that we get our work done so that we can be the most productive.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you have to measure that with, and you mentioned like as far as the backlog is concerned, if you have your product backlog and somebody has a new idea, that's great. And we want to be able to capture that, but we're not going to address it at the moment.
Right.
So by taking that item, putting it on the backlog, all that's saying is we're going to have a conversation at some point in the future about this, but because it's on the backlog, now we've established that transparency.
Right.
It's got visibility. It's not just a hallway conversation or an email.
Right.
Now we've made a deliberate action to say we need to come back and revisit. And the revisit could be, hey, that's a great idea. Or it could be, no, we're not going to do that. And it comes off. But every time that we do that, we're making a deliberate decision and maintaining that transparency into what the priorities are.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like something like that probably needs vetted. And that's the process that you would go through to vet it out, right? So the proper channels can have the discussion. So maybe it goes back to the executive team and the executive team says, oh, that is a great idea. Where are we going to prioritize that for the teams to work on?
What's going to slip in order to make that? Yeah.
Something you have to say no to.
Right.
Whether you verbally say no or not, every day we're making decisions where we are saying no to something.
Yeah.
So that 20% impact part is the part that you want to have visibility into.
Right.
Is it something that's part of that outcome we're going for? Yeah, I love that. So with the next section we've got is focus leaders create focused teams. So it's really about empowering and modeling how we set up those focus times, right? So describe a ripple effect, like people stop overworking, multitasking, or being spread thin. I think of the old waterfall stories of all the teams. Not necessarily, not the waterfall's bad, or for anybody else who works that way, it's like everything's in a phased effect and you get to hand it off after some point. But what used to happen in software engineering teams was what? They would get overworked, they'd get burned out.
Oh, we had a term for it. It was called the death march.
Right.
Right. And it basically is a matter of, either requirements are changing or there's something that's affecting the ability, dealing with learning curves.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes there's an overcommitment that it's like, okay, we think this is going to take 5 days to get it done and it ends up taking, 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
And what that does is when those other factors make an impact on the schedule, you need to be able to have that appropriate adjustment to say, okay, we need to reprioritize, reshuffle if we want to hit this end date. And if we can't reshuffle and reprioritize, then we have to extend the end date, right? And those are all the things that those feedback loops, provide for us. But yeah, that multitasking, that's a time killer.
Yeah.
Some people look at it as an asset. depending upon the context, it could also be a liability because you're never able to get anything knocked out and
You
completed.
can't be present with your mind in two places. So here's the thing. I feel like these things sometimes are going to happen. That's the reality. But if you want it to be less of the time, right? You want to mitigate those things. So maybe creating clarity. Here's some examples is that you're repeating. If I'm the leader, it's Monday morning and we're going to say, hey, what are our goals this week? What is our focus this week? Let's just reiterate what our impact areas are. So if you're asked anything or if you're looking at what you're getting done today, these are the prioritized things. Come to me if you've got questions. It's keeping it alive, right? And visible. Removing distractions, including unnecessary meetings. So maybe we've got some sort of barometer test for what that 20% focus is to go, you have all these meetings coming up. This doesn't meet so we're going to get to meetings a little bit because it will help identify this, but every meeting kind of needs to go against this quality check of, I can't right now. I'm going to pass. I'm not saying I don't want to be invited in the future, but not now, because these are our goals to stay focused on what we've been asked to deliver. So those can be just distractions, right? Celebrating outcomes, not overwork. So where we are successful, where we can go, you know what? We really put an emphasis on that outcome that we're going for. We were able to reduce those extra tasks or those extra things. Let's celebrate that we've modeled the behavior we're trying to do and we're seeing success in that. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that last point you made as far as celebrating outcomes, and you use the term not overwork, that's the output, right? You can spend 40 hours.
You can be busy, really busy.
Yeah, you can be really busy and not produce anything.
Yeah.
That's not the goal. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the prioritization comes back into play is what is the desired outcome that we want to be focusing on?
Yeah. So we've got a good question for all of you. You could ask yourself, or if you're in a leader, you might ask yourself and your team at the beginning of the week or wherever it makes sense, but what's the 20% that changes everything on your team right now? So if you put that lens on it and go, because it's very demanding to try and get all the projects and all the work that we got to do, start to put some guardrails in and maybe framing it with something like that would be a good start.
And I think the prioritization helps in that as well. And once there's an understanding across the entire organization, the importance of the priorities and respecting those priorities.
Yeah.
That's where I think the rubber meets the road there, in the sense that the best way to show that there's a better way of doing something
is to just do it, prove it,
and deliver.
Yeah.
Right. Because then you take any of the arguments out of the picture, because, if you're able to deliver something, let's say that you got a delivery that, you're getting product pushed out every 2 months. Well, make a change in it, provide that focus, respect the priorities, give your team that guardrail and that protection. And now if you're able to, show that you can get things of value out in 2 weeks consistently, once again, the argument goes away as to why are we doing this, because you're delivering the value. Yeah,
I think output versus outcome is a whole mindset shift or like realignment that people need to recognize. It's very hard when you're in the weeds.
Yeah.
Because you're getting pressure to get all these things done. To me, like even what we were just saying, if you're able to block for your team and they can focus on the impactful stuff, you might start to realize not that those other tasks don't matter, but maybe that shows you that there's another group that's needed that you could bring in, and that's what they focus on. And they're impactful on those other things, which are supportive or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Right. So it might be a misalignment on the who needs to be doing things.
Right.
So Kevin, we want to talk about meetings because I think it's the thing that any person in any company in any role, even if it's a volunteer role, because we're in volunteer roles on boards, and meetings are the Achilles heel sometimes of making you feel like your time or your ROI is worth it sometimes. So what are some of your guidance or things that you've tried that would give guidance to around meetings?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and I've actually gotten to the point with some teams, because I'd have people that are attending so many meetings that I gave them the direction. If there's not an agenda on the meeting, you have my permission to decline it.
That's kind of one of those like having the barometer test.
It
right?
is. And the thing of it is, by doing that, did that ruffle some feathers and cause me? Yes, it did.
We're changing behavior though.
But we're changing a behavior. You know, what you were doing, if you just, if you're blocking off 10 people's time for an hour,
It's very expensive.
it's very expensive. You start looking at, okay, what's their hourly rate times 10?
Times
the
however
average-
many often are those
right.
meetings are
How
occurring.
often is that occurring? And that's a big, waste of time and money.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I've done is just make sure that, when you are scheduling a meeting, make sure you have an agenda. If there is information that they need to have to discuss during the meeting,
Before the meeting.
make sure that you provide it, either in the meeting request or somehow they have to be able to have that so that they can prep beforehand.
Yeah.
Another thing that I always like about managing meetings is using the college scheduling.
Yeah.
Which is we don't have the Star Trek transporter where we can go from point A to point B instantaneously. But if you look at most people's schedule, you walk into any business and most times you're going to see, I've got a meeting from 9 to 10 to 10
Right.
to 11, 11 to 12.
Don't have time to go to the bathroom.
You don't have time. The whole transition.
Yeah.
Zoom kind of got us a little bit closer to the transporter because you could literally switch without
But people
moving.
still talk after.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
still something else. Yeah.
So, but just those little slight changes. So if there's an hour meeting, I set it for 50 minutes
Mm-hmm.
to give people that transition. If it's 30 minutes, I set it to 25. Same thing. It just, it adds that little bit of buffer in there, and just making that small change, it has, tremendous benefit.
You know what I was just thinking with that too, because all of us learn and retain information different. I'll take copious notes during a meeting, but I also like to go back through. Well, I would like to have that time afterwards to kind of go, okay, so I like to mark. I have a little thing that I do and how I know what my action items are. Other people probably have other things. So if you could use even 5 minutes of that time, nobody's talking, we just finished, that's done, I can get my notes in order.
Yeah.
So I know I'm ready for the next time we're going to have this meeting or whatever. I think there's a lot of benefits to that. It's all about modeling the behavior, and it is uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I think the other thing too is if you're able to prune down all of the wasteful meetings and really just focus on those that are benefiting the attendees themselves. Because once again, there's a lot of people that are just kind of shotgun approach.
Right.
It's like, I'm just going to invite everybody so everybody's hearing the same thing.
Yeah.
But in doing that, that eats up so much time, which means that people are not incentivized to prepare because they know that they're not going to have any voice in it.
Well, they know that it's kind of one of those meetings, right? So I don't want to be a hypocrite either, because our first episode, we talked about radical transparency and talked about having access to knowing the information and all that. So we realize it's a tightrope a little bit, and they're kind of doing like the big net sometimes when they invite people, but you need to be aware of who, it's kind of like the Moscow thing, right? Who must know, who needs to know, that sort of thing. So maybe you're copying people, but maybe you're putting them as optional. And the optional, I always write this myself. I'll say, so-and-so, we realize that you don't necessarily need to be in attendance, but we want you in the loop. So all of the action items, all of the pre-meeting things, so having the agenda, having all those things should all be visible. Yeah. It should be in the meeting invite. The follow-up stuff should be tied to that so everybody can see it. So we're still trying to be transparent, but we also don't want to be wasteful of people's time. But I think having the agenda, it requires somebody who's running it to respect people's time, to respect their own time, and to have their stuff put together, right? So if you have an agenda put together and it's 50 minutes, you can't talk about all of the things that you might want to talk about. So you're focusing that meeting specifically on whatever is top priority. So you have to prioritize what's in the meeting. Right. There's a huge benefit in that because, we all go to a meeting, it's not organized, and then it's a free-for-all on what we're and I love to talk to people, and I'm the first one that will bite onto that, and I'll get going, and I'm like, wait, we just wasted 20 minutes of stuff that has nothing to do with what we probably should be using our time on. Right. So the guardrails are important, and it will help your sanity. Okay, so I think, was there anything else you wanted to say about meetings? Because I just wanted to say, I kind of just did, but begin meetings by recentering on top priority. Like we were talking about with leaders, you might just join like that Monday and reset that. I think in the meetings, that's part of the agenda. It's like, here's our top priorities. If anybody has anything else, we'll add that, and that'll be not now, but maybe to the next one, it'll get reprioritized. Is there anything else you would add for meetings?
Yeah, I think the recentering is really important, and that's one of the practices, that we do from the agile perspective, like with Scrum, is life happens between when you last met.
Yeah.
So, that recentering is basically just that ability to look at, okay, what's changed from last time we got together? Do we need to make any type of adjustments? That goes back to the empirical process,
Yeah.
right? The inspect and adapt based on those changing factors. So the way that you conduct your meetings and that recentering, it just provides everybody the ability to focus on what's the most important thing that we're going to be doing today.
Well, and when you prepare it that way, people fall in alignment and they respect it. If you don't manage it, then it is like the Wild Wild West,
Yeah.
right? So it'll actually make you feel better about leading a productive meeting. And you can leave there going, everybody understands what action items are because we're building that model
Right.
around what we want to do. I wanted to take a couple minutes just to talk about some pain points that I think a lot of people have seen that kind of falls in alignment with this, not knowing what's prioritized, not knowing, treating all tasks or all things that have to get done with an equal spectacle, which isn't really the best way to go about things, right? So if we understand the data coming back from whatever it is that we're focusing on, then that'll help us prioritize. So do you know what 20% is? Do you know what the impact is? So 80%, of your time should go to or do I just say that backwards? I think I just said that backwards. So 20% of your time is going to go to 80% of your productive thing, whatever that outcome is, instead of 80% of your time, like I was just saying, and the 20%
Right.
is going to the things that really should get more of it. So too much to do, not enough time. That's kind of what we're talking about. Everybody's busy, but we're not making any progress. That is the output versus outcome thing we're
Right.
talking about. So focusing on that. So constantly multitasking, overcommitment, unclear priorities that dilute the impact. You're going to find that teams and leaders and individuals are all going to feel like they're stretched thin, and there's no meaningful outcomes. Everybody kind of knows it. So you need to take a breather, get organized and say, hey, we're going to try something new. Let's try to set this where these meetings, we're going to go to 50 minutes. We're going to always have the agenda beforehand. We're going to have where with the meetings recorded and afterwards, everybody who's supposed to come to the next meeting with some sort of agenda item or action item, that's accounted for. If there's something that comes up, it's transparent. Here's how we're sharing that. Just give the rules and then you'll start to build that model around it.
Well, one thing I think is important too, as you're looking at introducing those changes, make sure that you do that, over a period of time. You can't
Big bang.
you can't right the ship in just one fell swoop.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be those incremental adjustments that you have the ability to implement something, inspect it, did it work, did it not, and then as that becomes more of a standard practice and the discipline is there, then you introduce another factor to improve it, and that incremental nature is much easier for people to be able to absorb change rather than all of these things coming at once.
Everything at once is this way. I agree. But I also think like if you do that, you'll start to find that we're getting ready. It's a weekly meeting or something. All of a sudden we don't have anything to prioritize. We don't need the meeting. Right. So which otherwise that cadence would have just continued and it would have been wasted time and energy, taking you off of the focus of the things you should be on.
Yeah.
Another pain point, we've got a leader's model distraction without realizing it. So they say maybe focus on what matters, but that's not clear. It's not concise. And they themselves might be giving, responding to everything. They're part of every thread. They're giving feedback on everything. They're not prioritizing what matters. They're not doing that not now thing. So if there's a lack of boundaries, there's going to be a lack of modeled focus, right?
Well, and the thing it is, what everybody needs to be aware of is you are modeling behavior, whether it's good or bad,
intentional or otherwise.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we've kind of belabored this, but I'm just going to say it just for clarity. So no one knows what's actually most important. So we don't know what the real priorities are. So other than we know who's yelling the loudest or what's getting the loudest focus. And that might be by a person or a group or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the actual priority.
Right.
How do we set up guardrails for that? That's a tougher one,
Yeah.
right? And then, so you talked about deep work. Did you define deep work before?
Yeah, deep work is basically just giving you the opportunity to really dig into, what you were trying to accomplish without distractions. I think the distraction, my observation after being in this industry and just in business for so long is we've got like societal ADD.
Yeah.
Right. You can't keep people's attention, and we are conditioned, for those multiple interruptions. And you actually have to work at this. One of the things I have to personally work at is, like, don't have my Outlook open if I'm working on something.
Yeah.
Because
Ding, and it's very squirrel effect.
It's kind of like Pavlov's dog.
Well, now it's Teams and Zoom and Outlook. And,
right.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to quiet your environment and shut all of that off so that you can just commit and focus to getting something done.
That's why I like to work late, because that's actually when I can
That's
focus.
why I like to work early.
So you find those things. I'm working long days, but I'm happier that I get stuff done.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you got to set up some boundaries. This one's kind of interesting. So about the deep work, maybe it's undervalued or it's ignored because people don't know. It's not that they can't, it is common sense, but if it's not brought up into like something that you make important and that people have a shared understanding about, it would get devalued, right? So,
well, and the other thing too is if you don't have that ability to have that focus time and to commit, you may find yourself having to work longer, right?
You're just responding. You're just in a reactive mode.
Because in your 9 to 5, period, you may be so fragmented throughout the day that it's like, okay, it's 4 o'clock. I need to get something
now I got to
done.
get some work done.
Now you're just staying there till 7, 8 o'clock at night because your day was too fragmented.
Yeah. Which that's actually a really good symptom to watch for. So as a leader, that might be something that you
Why is this person staying late?
Do a survey even to your team though, right? That's like, just fill this out. Just be honest as you can. How often do you do these things? And then you could start to have the conversations around it. And if you start to see patterns, how can I help to fix that? In HR, you could do something. So from a larger cultural thing, how could we make sure that we're changing the culture this way? We don't want our people getting burnt out. We also don't want to spend money on things that are wasteful. So how do we keep people focused, engaged and excited and feeling productive in what they're supposed to be doing? And maybe we can refocus other groups to take on some of those other things, right? Yeah. So patterns will show us a lot. So lack of boundary signals availability, equals value. So I'm not always accessible. I feel like I'm letting people down. But it goes back to that whole focus time thing, right? So your time is valuable. You're being able to sit there and do a quality job. That's the other thing. I think quality drops in what you're doing when you have so much context switching going on, when you're being pulled in all those different directions. Something's going to fall through the cracks. So if we have that at a mass number, at a scale, the quality overall is going to drop for the organization or for the team. So it's kind of like anything else, like the planning you put in before something, the more time and energy you put into that, it might take a lot of time up front and it seems like it's not going to result in what you want. But if you truly put that effort in and people buy into it and you keep it with discipline, you will see the payoff and it's actually going to benefit you in the long run. Focus is treated as a personal skill, not a cultural signal. So we tell people to focus, but the environment tells them, let's go in 100 different directions. So while we're saying these things, the culture is in alignment. So there's different symptoms you can watch. And I think kind of from a holistic perspective in an organization, or if you're a leader of a department, you could do things where you're kind of surveying or having focus time with people or asking these teams, going to meetings and asking questions, getting the data back to go, we're seeing patterns. So where do we need to fix this? Is it across the board or is it a group of people that maybe they don't run those meetings anymore, or somebody comes in and coaches them on how to build those? Not everybody's good at that. Not everybody knows how to do that, right? So there's some things to watch for that you could start to slowly move that ship and relieve the people. They're going to be a happier culture overall, I would say. So anyways, do you have any other thoughts or finalizations on this from the 80-20 rule or Pareto?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would say as a takeaway is just having that awareness and, both from an individual contributor or from a leadership perspective, is being aware and observe, where the work is being done. And most importantly, I think, is don't focus on the output. Did you put in 40 hours?
Yes.
Who cares?
Yes.
It really comes down to what is the outcome. People, when given that ability to manage their own work and not be micromanaged, when they take that ownership, that's where you're also going to see kind of a cultural change as well, because they're focusing on that outcome. They're not looking at the clock saying, how many hours am I putting in? That's an irrelevant. We're not in the industrial age where you have, factory workers doing the same thing. We have a lot of creative activities now in our professions, and that requires everybody, to have that ownership and be able to solve those problems, the best that they can.
Well, several things came into my head when you were saying that, but the last thing that came in my head was how we can automate now too. That's a whole other conversation. We're going to have a series on AI and some of that, but it is something that could be helpful on some of those other tasks that need to get done. Maybe that's a lens that you look at and go, maybe it's not people. Maybe we can automate some of those processes for those supportive things or those things that are less of a priority.
Yeah.
That could be an outlet that you look at. I was thinking about in my daily, like how I prioritize something, right? So we run multiple companies. We got all these different things. We've got family things like everybody else. How do I figure out in a day, all of these things need my time? How do I figure out what I need to prioritize? And even you and I going back and forth, or with our other business partner, it's like your prioritization in your brain, his prioritization in his brain versus mine, we are not in alignment sometimes. And we just had that today, right? So in my mind, there's certain things that I think we need to do, and there's a reason why. I didn't necessarily communicate that to you. You did the same thing, right? So are they all important? Yes, but which is most? We have to get in alignment on that. But when I go through, I was thinking about, I'm a list person, not because I think I'm the traditional list person. It's more about I have too many things, and to put it all, I have it in Outlook and I've got it all on my phone. But for me, writing it down, when I come out of a meeting, part of that is I've got like this kind of like a checkbox, and I've got a certain thing that I do. So I know if I follow up on a status meeting that we have every week with a client, here are the things that I have to do. That's one thing. Then I have over here, I have these other things. So for me, making a list where I group it out by, this, let's say Agile Couple has got something, and then IQ Solutions has something, and then Fast Ascension has something. And then I've got all these different areas. I have the same system, but I've got one list. That is a way that I am able to prioritize, and I can even rank those. And I am not a procrastinator. I don't like that. So I understand why people do it, but I don't think I fall into that thing of like, I put something off because I don't want to do it. I almost want to tackle it more because I think it's going to eat more of my time, and I'm about ROI. So my perspective is different. But I remember you using the Franklin Covey system for a long time. And why did that work for you?
It basically allows you to have that prioritization, because you basically go through your list and you mark, okay, anything that's an A, that's something that it has to get done. It's kind of like the Moscow, right? Must have, should have, could have. And then you've got your B and your C. So same thing, you put everything in there. So you got transparency of what needs to be done, but then you go through the ranking and say, okay, I got 10 things, but I've got 2 that absolutely have to get done today. So that's my A1 and my A2. Everything else is a B and a C, right? If I don't get to them, that's okay.
And that's the not now. That's going to go over.
It's the not now. And that's something that would just carry over into the next day. But that ability to prioritize and have that tactile side, where you're actually writing it down, I think that's what you benefit from.
Yeah.
That's how you learn. That's how you retain it. When I utilize that system, that's when I'm far more effective and efficient with my time, because I've got that checklist. You get the little dopamine endorphin rush when you check something off. Yeah. So it's a feeling of accomplishment, and just those little things can make a huge difference.
For me too, it's also the fact that it's visual. So because all of us learn different. And so for me, I'm not just visual. I'm all of I think most of us are probably blended, but for me, there's something about the visual as a reminder for me and how I remember. And then the kinesthetic, obviously, of doing it. But you and I talking about it, actually, so even some of our employees, they'll say something to me, and I'm listening to you, but it is not going to retain. I have to have you send me something. That's the only way. I have to visually see it, and then I add it to my list. Yeah. Otherwise, you can say we talked about it. I remember that we had a conversation, but I have no recollection of what we talked about. For me, that doesn't work. So I have to communicate that. But I was also thinking about, I think ownership is true, and how you're saying people do want to not be micromanaged. I think most people would agree with that. But there's also the other side of that, is that not giving the right prioritization or vision of what you're expecting of them. And not everybody has the tool set or skill set to be able to prioritize. So you can't just leave them absent either. And that takes some time. And sometimes I have not been great with that. I've noticed just in some people that work for us, like, okay, I want you to go do it. I'm expecting you've been in the working world for 10 years. You've not. You're newer to the working world. So I'm taking for granted these things. And it's knowledge bias. I got to go back and go, okay, so for me, this is what I expect to see. And this is priority. I expect you to own it. So I'm not going to tell you if I have to do it all, then that dilutes why I have somebody else doing it. And that just adds more stress to me. So I want to delegate, but I want you to make sure you're doing it in the prioritized way, that I have ownership in that. I'm the leader. I need to give you that.
Yep.
Right. So what do you say to that?
No, I think that's, once again, it's that modeling aspect, whether or not you're aware of it or not, whether or not it's good or it's bad.
Yeah.
People are going to pick up on it.
Yeah.
So I think just having that awareness, that self-awareness, and then also being able to observe your teams as well and make sure that, okay, if I'm not getting these results, maybe it's not a them issue, maybe it's a me issue.
Right. If there's enough patterns that show that. Also, like, what kind of feedback loops do you have with your teams? So, I mean, we do a lot of give a lot of guidance, and we know how agile teams work. It doesn't mean every day that we're working the way that we know it should be. And so the feedback loops and the constant watching of patterns and letting everybody have a voice is really important. And sometimes you got to take the bad news to go, yep, that was me. That's my bad. But doing some form of a retrospective, whether you're an agile team or not, where it's open, you got to set the context, but you say, okay, let's just talk about, so we try to put this new thing into practice for our meetings, right? And it's 2 weeks in now. Let's retrofit what's working, what's not working with that. Is it too rigid? Is it not rigid enough? Where are we at? What do we want to try next? That's kind of a good way to move forward, I think.
Yep,
so,
agreed.
All right, good. Well, I think we've covered this pretty well. That finishes out that series, our second series, which is pretty cool. Our next series is going to be fun on kind of focusing on breaking down barriers in different ways. We've talked about some of this stuff in here before, like silos, and I don't know everything that's in there, but we want to give cultural and team and individual guidance around how to work better and breaking down some barriers. So that should be interesting.
Yep, looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. Please, we're trying to build our community right now. So share our podcast. We're out there on Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcast. We're on TikTok. We're on Instagram. We're on all the things. And we're trying to build this community. We want to really be covering what's important to all of you. So, give us comments, reach out to the Agile Couple. And we're actually going to be doing some interviews. We're going to be traveling and interviewing a lot of really cool people. We're going to be talking to some people in the tech world, talking about people that run learning and development groups, lots of different things coming on the horizon. So if there's something that you find of interest that you think would be helpful to you as a leader, helpful to you on your team, or helpful to you just as an individual, send us some information and let us know what else you'd like to see.
Yep, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks all.